Welcome to Liner Notes. My name is David Bixler. Heads up that due to COVID-19, this interview was recorded remotely. It might not be the same quality as if recorded in a studio. Fred Hersch's new recording, Breath by Breath, features his trio along with string quartet. In this episode of Liner Notes, Fred talks about the meditation practice that inspired this eclectic music that was created as he was sequestered in northeastern Pennsylvania during the pandemic. Fred, welcome. And what should have been the day after a celebratory week at the Vanguard has been postponed due to the pandemic, but we are here to celebrate your new recording, Breath by Breath, with your trio and the Crosby Street String Quartet. So welcome. I thank you for taking the time to speak with us today. Going on almost 2 years now, I've been interviewing musicians monthly, and I think listeners are interested in the pandemic story, how artists are coping, like what you've been doing. Obviously, this recording represents a lot, so why don't I just let you explain about the recording and how you dealt with going on 2 years now.
Yeah, well, in March of 2020, when everything got locked down, several days actually after lockdown, my partner Scott and I, we decamped from Lower Manhattan to our second place in Northeast Pennsylvania. And a friend of mine died very early on, the middle of March. And I just decided to basically put my phone up on a little stand and do a Facebook Live and show his picture and talk about him. And then I decided after that, I got such a really nice, warm response that for 6 or 8 weeks, every day at 1 o'clock, I just sat down and played a tune called a Tune of the Day. And in the beginning, I said I was going to do it for the duration. Of course, nobody knew what that was. After a couple months, it was starting to become a little bit of a chore. And as it went on, I decided to make a home recording with the same feeling of Tune of the Day, just play some songs that I thought people would enjoy, make them happy, like you're just sitting in my living room and I'm playing some nice music for you. And that was called Songs from Home, which I recorded on my laptop. And it got a lot of really great attention, and it seemed to really resonate with people as a kind of a real COVID album. Also, there were not that many records coming out at that time, so it had really a nice window for people to talk about it. And this album, Breath by Breath, was something that we were supposed to record in May, the May after lockdown. And it really wasn't until vaccines came earlier last year that I was able to kind of get everybody to sign on to do this. So we had a reading of the rough music with just me and the string quartet in May, and then another rehearsal with everybody, and then we recorded at the end of August, and the album is just coming out this week. And the album really takes its inspiration from the practice of insight meditation, which I've been doing for many years, and it's related to COVID in that my practice really sustained me through some really rough times, really not wanting to play music, wondering if it was all over. Who am I without, the trappings of being a pretty successful musician, performing and all that stuff. I did online retreats and sitting groups, and all of it was super helpful. So I wanted to somehow take that inspiration and turn it into something musical. And I also wanted to do an album of all my own compositions, which I haven't really done in a long time. I thought I wanted to put myself out there as a composer, and I could have done a trio album, but I just decided I wanted to do something a little larger. So that's kind of where this album came from.
Great. Now, with the Crosby Street String Quartet, I understand that this is your first recording with strings with the string quartet. What prompted you, as you wanted to do something larger, what prompted you to elect to write for string quartet?
Well, I have a long history with string quartets my entire life. I was a bad violinist when I was younger, didn't really love it, was never that comfortable with it. But I've written things for strings, for string orchestra, a fair amount over the years that I've been doing arranging and stuff. The great thing about a string quartet is, you can put them together as four separate contrapuntal voices. They can also be like a horn section. They can be like create a beautiful pad, a texture. And my idea with this album, it's basically a suite of 8 pieces that I'm hoping people will buy into listening to straight through because they do connect and do tell a story. But I use the strings in different ways on different tracks. There's one track with just strings alone, string quartet alone. There's a few tracks with everybody. There's some where the strings play alone, I play alone, strings play alone. One track where they're actually playing on their strings, bouncing pencils to get kind of a drone effect. And I've heard a number of these projects, some of which I like very much. I mean, people do seem to be doing things with string quartet, at least piano players I know. But if you have the strings there all the time, then you sort of don't hear them. So I wanted places where they were more present, less present, they go away, different textures. And I also wanted to be practical about this album because, say, I'm planning to play this program in Europe with 4 additional arrangements, and I didn't want it to be so crushingly difficult that any good string quartet could, with preparation and listening to the album, that we couldn't really put it together in one long rehearsal. And there's no improvising for the string, so I don't have to find a quartet where I have an improvising cellist or violinist. It's all thoroughly written. So I wanted to make something that would have an effect, but not be too terrible to put together, on reasonable notice.
Is Mara the one you were referring to with the pencils on the bows?
Yeah,
I mean, on the
and
strings. Yeah.
yeah, and Rogerio Bucato joins us on percussion. Mara was an evil god who tempted Buddha when he was sitting under the Bodhi tree trying to attain enlightenment. And he appeared and said, I'll give you women and wine and money, whatever you want, for you to, if you give up. And Buddha just said, no, thank you, and just did his thing. But he was definitely like the tempter, kind of a devil sort of character. So I wanted something that sounded a little like kind of hip belly dancing music, very, very Eastern flavor to it. And yeah, and it was really fun. That was a fun one to do.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you about Know That You Are. You talked about the use of the strings, and this is string quartet alone. I was curious as I read that this started the suite, even though it's buried down toward the bottom, but this was the first piece that you wrote. At the point that you were writing this, did you know this was going to be trio plus string quartet, or did you write this and then everything blossomed from this first piece?
No, it was just a piece of material that I wrote, and I wasn't sure whether it was a tune whether I would improvise on the flavor of it, whether it be a solo piece, whether it be something that would involve trio. And originally, the strings were going to play it, and there was going to be a solo section and then some sort of recap. And the more I listened to it, I just thought, I'm not really going to add anything to this thing. It's 3+ minutes. It's not that long, but it's sort of the penultimate piece of the suite. And I thought it would really be nice orchestrationally to just let the strings have that moment by themselves. But my intention was to treat it as a tune rather than as a through composed piece. And these are the things you discover in the rehearsal process too. 3 days before the recording, I called Ruggiero. I said, I need percussion on this tune. It wasn't even something that I considered. And then I thought, no, this is really, hope he's free. And we've worked together before, and he just adds a really cool little color to this piece. So there was a lot of preparation, but then also a lot of kind of spontaneous decisions as we got closer to the recording.
Right. In that's Mara that he's on. You said that there's no improvisation for the strings. It sounds on that one though that the trio, like a lot of that's improvised.
Oh yeah, we're playing just as a rhythm section,
Yeah.
most of the time. Um, and although I played for many years with John Abair and Eric McPherson, we have a pretty well-oiled trio. I didn't feel like they were quite the right players for this album. Drew Graffs I played with for probably 30 years. And Jochen Ruckert is kind of new to me, although not exactly. We played together many, many years ago, but he has a really kind of great spirit and a little bit of irreverence. He wasn't just reading the parts. He was kind of instigating some unexpected things that I really loved. And he's very thoughtful. I mean, he thought a lot in advance about the music and, really internalized it. And I think he gave it a looseness that I really appreciated. And for me, in the end, I just had to be a piano player. I couldn't really micromanage everything else. So I had Frankie Russo, who did the music copying for all that. He put my pencil scores in the Sibelius notation program. And he was my producer in the control room, and he took meticulous notes and, was super helpful in post-production. And I just knew that I needed somebody in there to do that because I really couldn't manage it myself. I just had to just be a piano player to the extent that I possibly could let go.
Hmm. You had mentioned that you read through the parts with the strings in May before the recording. You have several months after. Did anything change after you heard what you had written originally?
Oh yeah, yeah, things did change. I'm really glad I did that reading. I think it also let uh, the women in the quartet kind of know what they were in for, what the parameters were in terms of what they would really have to work on and work on their own to get it together. This is the first project I had done with the Sibelius notation program. And what it does is it allows you, once it's been copied into the program, it allows you to hear back with actual single violin and cello viola sounds. And so I could go through and adjust, maybe a chord could have been better, or, I wanted them to phrase it differently than what I had. So I could actually go in myself. I'm not great with it, but I could go in myself and make note changes and also correct mistakes, because in rehearsal, it's really annoying if they're just note mistakes. It slows everything down. So I was able to do that advanced prep by listening and an occasional Zoom screen share with Frankie, so that we could, improve everything and make the parts as good as we possibly could, so there would be no delay about, most things. Everything was clear. So it was really helpful.
All right. You had also mentioned that you tried to make the string parts playable. One piece in particular, I believe it is Worldly Winds, sounded like the string parts a little dicey. Is that the one where they're trading during the drum solo?
Yeah, and
Yeah, it's super cool.
yeah, and it's a pretty wicked introduction.
Yeah.
Really, that's actually the hardest thing on the record was that introduction. And that is the only thing where we actually had them play their parts individually and put it together, because they couldn't do it live. And at a certain point, we just said, okay, we're going to do it this way. But everything else was done live. And for me, the fun of it was, hearing the strings, hearing what I'd written, using that to inspire me. And also I wanted to leave enough room for myself as a composer, spontaneous composer, to add, the final stuff. I didn't want to overwrite, but it was just super fun. A couple of really long days, but really fun.
Great. For the week at the Vanguard, the string quartet I understood was going to be with you. So was this on the docket? You were going to just go for
Yeah,
it?
I'm going to do the 9 tracks on the album, plus I made 4 more arrangements to make like a 70-minute set. And I've been kind of in composition world. Thursday the 13th January, this great concert pianist Igor Levit is premiering a piece I wrote for him at Carnegie Hall, which we think will go on. It's not been canceled, so we're pretty confident that it's going to happen. And that's pretty thrilling, to have a piece played by one of the great concert pianists in the world in one of the greatest halls in the world. And I have to say I'm a little nervous about it, because obviously I'm not on the stage and I don't have any control of anything. But I think he'll do it justice, and hopefully people won't throw tomatoes.
Now, is there any improvisation in this piece? Everything's written.
None at all. It's a straight classical piece. It's a set of variations on an American folk song, O Shenandoah.
Mhm.
And I've written several sets of large kind of virtuoso variations, and it's the kind of piece he wanted. He said, I want a 20-minute piece. I want some variations. I want something American. So I just tailored it to what he wanted, which was actually easier than thinking, what should I do? And as somebody who kind of makes his living playing variations on themes, it's a fairly easy format for me, because I can just do these little pieces and string them all together, and then I have a big piece.
Right. Now, is you being a jazz pianist and he being a concert pianist, classical pianist, was your language, did that prove to be difficult for him to capture what you had put to paper?
Uh, well, I'm now 66. I've been composing music since I was about 8. I kind of write the way that I write. I have a style. Something that I've been aware of is many times say a classical string quartet or pianist or orchestra will ask, somebody from a different world, the jazz world, whatever, to write a piece uh, for them. And often what they do, say if they're asked to write a string quartet, they listen to, Brahms and Schubert and Bartok and Shostakovich, and they end up kind of writing a piece that's not as good as those pieces. And they struggle with that language. And Igor, who's been playing a lot of my smaller pieces and transcriptions, he really wanted something that sounded like me. He did not want me to imitate anybody else. So he's going to really sound a fair amount like me. And I also wrote him some difficult stuff, because he can certainly play anything. And I wanted it to be a little flashy, but not overwhelmingly so. When you're doing variations on a theme, the theme kind of lets you know what you can do with it. There's a picture frame, you're working within a structure. So I think that theme made me do the things that I did with it. And I have no doubt, I mean, he's very happy with it. I'm going to hear him play it this coming Monday. We're going to do a little rehearsal and coaching, but I have no doubt that he will really play it beautifully.
Great. I wish you success with that. Want to jump into your compositional process a little bit. You've touched on it. In a way, in reading your notes about the music, it's maybe programmatic. Some of them are specific to the meditation process. Did those concepts then manifest themselves in the music? The one that kind of jumped out to me, "Begin Again." talks about in meditation kind of being distracted and reeling yourself back in. A lot of meter changes in that one. And I couldn't help but think, well, that was intentional. Maybe unpack a little bit about that.
Yeah, that was, and that piece which opens the album, it features at the end just sort of this loop of a set of chords that keeps going around, which is kind of the circle. I refer to that also in rising, falling, which is my kind of my chest going up and down as I breathe. Breath by breath has this like almost a heartbeat in a pizzicato cello, just like right at the tempo that you might breathe. Begin Again was the was really one of the only pieces that existed before. I did an album with Vince Mendoza and the WDR Big Band, which was called Begin Again. But that title and that concept did come from the meditation in a certain way. And I just decided to repurpose it in a different arrangement. Rising, Falling, I had done on a trio album many, many years ago, but I never really liked the performance. So in that piece, the strings are just doing these little breathing, they're like just going monkey mind, the distraction that happens when you meditate. So there's a lyrical line and then these little pizzicato string things that get more and more insistent, and more distracting. Um, I, Writing with a program in mind is kind of nice. Um, there's a wonderful story about Stravinsky that I'll paraphrase, but basically he said, if somebody gave me a studio and everything I needed to write whatever I want, everything provided, and just write whatever you want. He said he would be pretty terrified. But if they said, okay, we want a 4.5 minute piece for 12 tubas and a piccolo, he said he would be like right on it. So, it's very hard to just sit down and wait for the great idea to drop from the sky. If I'm writing a certain kind of tune or a certain kind of rhythm, or I have the title, which I did in some cases before I had the tune, it just gives you some structure instead of, okay, I'm just going to write something. Now that can happen sometimes. A great thing will just drop out of the sky. Like Mara was written in 15, 20 minutes. I mean, that just came to me. And it was by looking at all the other pieces and saying, we need a different texture. It's like planning a menu. You don't want to have starch, and starch. You need vegetables and you need colors. And planning a set, planning an album is, it's a menu of sorts, and the way things work together. And hopefully, in the end, it's satisfying. I know people don't listen to albums straight through these days, or a lot of them. That's why I made it a short album. And also, I can split it right in half for an LP, which is what people seem to be wanting to buy right now. But I know when it goes up on Spotify or Apple Music, it's going to be a track. It's just going to say Begin Again, Fred Hersch, or Worldly Winds, Fred Hersch. It won't say anything about it, which is frustrating, but it's just kind of the way people are listening right now. Hopefully, enough of them stand alone that they would be worthy of a listen on their own. But I think they have more power if they're listened to it as a whole.
Well, if it's an encouragement, my son and I listened to it straight through this morning, again prior to, and I think it's very successful as a cohesive unit. That's great. Fred, before I let you go, providing they get this under control, life opens up again. What's on your docket? What do you got coming up?
Yeah, it's a good question. In June, and also, June, July, and also October, November, I did 1 month in Europe both times. And in the fall, I played at the Village Vanguard and did live recording with Julian Lage on guitar as a duo. I had a lot of amazing concerts. I made my first recording for ECM when I was over in Europe with the great trumpet player Enrico Rava. Right now, I'm supposed to go back to Europe for maybe 10 days in March, for a longer time in May, also July, November. I'll be back at the Vanguard in the summer. I have some small trio gigs here and there. But just given my age, and whatever minor status I have, I was very, very busy before the lockdown. I mean, almost too busy. It's like just too much going on. And I think now that I'm coming out, of course, there are going to be less engagements. But also, I think this would be a time where I would be becoming naturally choosier. You get to a certain point, and I don't want to just fly to the middle of nowhere for a paycheck. I'm interested in doing things that are fun, creative, that maybe are good for my career in some way. Money is nice, but I'm going to be doing less things, but I think they'll be more meaningful. And especially in Europe, as I've gotten out of the clubs for the most part, other than the occasional fill in, and I'm really playing the better concert halls, and circumstances and conditions are really good. That took around 20 years to build, really very meticulously, to bump things up. And in the States too, I'm trying to just play, the better venues and the better situations. Of course, I have hopes that this project with string quartet will find a home in some performing arts series, university concert series. I don't really know. I think booking agents and managers are going nuts right now because things are on, things are off, things get kicked down the road, rebooked. I think it's very difficult for the people that support music and do the business of music. But all I can do is try to put out the best thing that I can do, and just hope that it has resonance. I will be putting out a limited edition LP of something I did with Esperanza Spalding, just singing, not playing the bass, at the Village Vanguard. We played there a few nights and did live recording. And I think it's the first time that people will hear her as just a totally badass jazz singer. She is really remarkable as a jazz singer. And I don't think she's ever quite done that, where she's just really letting it go. So that's kind of on the docket. Maybe another trio album with a different rhythm section. I don't know. I always have ideas, but as somebody who puts out records once, twice a year, I try to make them all different from each other. Solo, then a trio, now this project with string quartet, then maybe a duo album with Julian or Esperanza, then a trio album, but with a different trio, to keep audience interested and to keep press interested. So I feel very fortunate to have things to look forward to. And if engagements come and go, I'm going to still be motivated to keep doing the next thing.
Fantastic. Fred Hersch, Breath by Breath on Palmetto Records. Check it out. Fred, thank you for your time. Be safe and sane out there, man.
Yes, everybody stay well.
Liner Notes is grateful for the support of Van Doren Reeds and Mouthpieces. Be sure and check out the Van Doren Advisory Studio in New York City for all your sound sculpting needs. Liner Notes is grateful for the support of Arlen's Good Beer in Bowling Green, Ohio. Sound by Marco Mendoza. The theme music is No FOMO, Mofo by yours truly. Produced by David Bixler. Be sure and subscribe to Liner Notes wherever you find your podcasts. If you like what you hear, I ask that you consider supporting Liner Notes financially. You can do this by going to the Liner Notes tab at davidbixler.com. Thank you for your consideration.